on January 18th, the Treasury hit up against the debt ceiling and now is maneuvering around using extraordinary measures to prevent a default on our debt. Now, we believe, most people believe, that these extraordinary measures will be good until some point in June. So in June, and as we get towards June, there will be more drama. But we do believe after, I think it was S&P or Moody's, maybe both of them, downgraded U.S. debt when Congress reached an impasse. No one wants to go through that again or be blamed for it, especially as we're now moving in toward another election year, a national election year. So we think there will be better behavior this time around, and I certainly hope so. We are now officially on a year-over-year basis in negative territory when it comes to M2. M2 is down 1.3% on a year-over-year basis as of December, and it looks like could be down almost 2% in January. We have not seen declines in M2 on a year-over-year basis since the Great Depression in the 1930s. Now, it is true we went through an explosion in money that got us to 27% growth during COVID. I think that 27% growth rate was in February of 21. So we have passed, we've cycled through that, and now we are going into negative territory. So we think that bears careful watching and may be the reason the Fed is softening its tune a bit, and we'll get into that. Yield curve, minus 75 basis points. So long-term interest rates are 0.75% below short-term interest rates. Very unusual, an unusually long period of time that this has happened. You have to go back to the early 80s to see this inverted yield curve and an inverted yield curve that has lasted as long as this one has. Now that means, we believe, that the bond market sees much lower real growth and or much lower inflation in the years ahead than the Fed does. And so we believe that also is a reason that the Fed is softening its rhetoric. The Fed funds rate did go up this week. February 1st, the Fed announced a 25 basis point increase in the Fed funds rate. So now we're at 4.75%. And that is up 19-fold from 0.25, where we were as recently as last March. We have never seen this dramatic an increase in interest rates, ever. You couldn't go back through all of history and never see this rapid an increase, and nor an increase of this magnitude in terms of multiples of the base rate, so 19 times. And so we believe that the Fed now, because of signaling from money supply and the yield curve, is beginning to think that it should step back. Now, it didn't say so. Chairman Powell said, no, we have more to go. We need to make sure inflation gets back down to 2%. I think right now on the CPI, we're about 6%. And the CPI, of course, is a lagging indicator because rents factor into it with such a lag. Now, a couple of other things happened in the last week to give us the sense that Chairman Powell is getting a little more uncomfortable with the Fed's position. One is that two advisors, or we believe that these individuals advise the Fed, who used to be on the warpath against inflation, have changed their tune a bit. Not that they think letting inflation go is what we should do, but I think they're becoming a bit fearful that that Fed policy might have gone too far after really encouraging the Fed to tighten up. One is Janet Yellen, who is the current Treasury Secretary, and you'll remember the word transitory. She had used transitory as inflation was picking up. And then in quite a dramatic moment, she apologized for using the word transitory, said she was mistaken. This was sometime last year, and really almost encouraged the Fed to act as aggressively as possible. And that's when we started getting the sense that 75 basis points was going to be the norm, not the exception. Well, she's changed her tune. And in this last week, she said something like, once we're through this inflation and we've got it under control, and we seem to be doing that, we're probably going to be facing an environment where inflation and growth are very, very low and problematic for businesses. So that's a big change. And in essence, what she is saying is that, you know what, maybe that inflation was transitory. Maybe it was because of a supply shock associated with COVID and all the supply chain problems that we had, and then the war in the Ukraine. Maybe those shocks are why we had this inflation. And now those shocks are diminishing to some extent, or to a great extent. And we're going to be facing a very low growth world, maybe even teetering on the edge of deflation. And we are getting a lot of deflationary signals. Another person who has changed his tune fairly dramatically is Larry Summers, who was a former Treasury Secretary. And he was cheering the Fed on last year as it was hiking rates 75 basis points at a time. And he was saying, no, we're going to have to go to 6, 7, 8% to get this inflation under control. And now he's saying, whoa. Ahead of the Fed meeting, he said, don't suggest what you're going to do next. Let's sort of wait and see. Of course, the Fed did go up 25 basis points, and I think that's because it had primed us to expect 25 basis points. But now he's got two advisors who I think were very influential last year, who are basically saying, wait a minute. In fact, after today's employment report, which we'll get into in a minute, Larry Summers said, whoa. I actually think that businesses are going to feel like Wile E. Coyote. They're still hiring like crazy as activity is falling. So, they may be looking over the cliff.